Early in 2012, my partner Carol and I take a group tour across Spain with the American company Go Ahead. This is my first visit to Spain in 50 years. The country and I have changed enormously since my last visit here with my parents back in the 1960s. The tour begins in Madrid and will end some 2 weeks later in Barcelona. Since we don't stay in any one place more than a few days, my impressions of Spain are admittedly quite superficial. There are few reminders in Madrid that during the Middle Ages, much of the Iberian Peninsula was under Muslim rule for almost 800 years. Later, Spain becomes the world's first global superpower, and for centuries rules one of the largest empires in history. Established in the 15th century, the Spanish Empire launches the modern global era with worldwide European dominance. As part of this legacy, Spanish is currently the world's second most spoken native language, following Mandarin Chinese. Today's Kingdom of Spain is a highly developed parliamentary democracy with a population of 47 million. Madrid is the second largest city in the EU after Berlin. The heart of Old Madrid is the portico-lined Plaza Mayor and the Royal Palace. The central parts of the city that we visit are very attractive, with many impressive buildings from the late 19th century and earlier. This chocolate store dates to the 1890s and offers what our guide claims is the best chocolate in all of Spain. The bustling plazas in downtown Madrid are filled with tourists from around the world. Most of the beautiful churches we visit are opulently decorated with Baroque statues and paintings inside lavish gold frames. Most of the population is traditionally Roman Catholic, although today 1/3 of the population has no religious affiliation and most of the Catholics don't attend church. The Royal Botanical Garden was founded by King Ferdinand II in 1755. It displays thousands of flowering plants and trees, with an emphasis on specimens from Spain's former colonies. The beautiful city of Toledo is situated on the Tagus River in the central part of the country known as La Mancha. Its colorful history dates back thousands of years to the pre-Roman era. It was conquered by Moorish forces in the early 8th century and remained under Muslim rule for more than 3 centuries. When it was recaptured by the army under Castilian King Alfonso VI in 1085, it marked the first time a major city was retaken by Christian forces in Muslim Spain, known as Al-Andalus. The Santa Cruz Museum is in a 500-year-old building that was originally a hospital. Today it contains important archaeological and art collections, including a number of paintings by El Greco. He was a Greek artist who lived and worked here for most of his life. The Toledo Cathedral is built exactly where the city's main mosque had previously stood for 3 centuries. It's one of only 3 13th century High Gothic cathedrals in Spain and is considered by many to be the best expression of that style. There were few other tourists in the city while we were there, so it was particularly enjoyable walking up and down the winding streets in Toledo. The synagogue was built in 1180 and is arguably the oldest one still standing in all of Europe. It's unique in that it was built under the Christian Kingdom of Castile by Muslim architects for Jewish use. For over 2,000 years, Toledo has been known for its fine steelworking and sword making. Many of the weapons used by the Roman legions were made here. While swords are still produced, the market has shifted to distinctive jewelry. We traveled by high-speed train to the provincial capital of Cordoba. This once Roman city was largely destroyed and then rebuilt by Muslim invaders in the early 8th century. For the next 300 years, Cordoba served as the capital of the Umayyad Emirate and later Caliphate of Andalus. The Umayyad Caliphate was one of the largest empires in history and extended all the way from Spain to India. At its peak around the year 1000, Cordoba was one of the largest cities in the world, with some 400,000 inhabitants. It was also one of the most advanced cities, a great political, educational, and financial center that was both multicultural and multi-ethnic. While Muslim rulers were firmly in control, there was also a large Jewish presence along with the majority of residents who were Christian. In its heyday, the city was an international center of science, medicine, and philosophy, with some 700 mosques and over 80 libraries and institutions of learning. After Muslim rule ended in the 13th century, the long period of religious tolerance ended. Hundreds of mosques were destroyed or converted to Christian churches. The Mezquita, or Great Mosque, was begun in the 8th century. Later additions extended the structure with more domed bays, arches, intricate mosaics, and a minaret. The alternating red and white elements of the arches were inspired by those of Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock. The 850 columns are made of jasper, onyx, marble, granite, and porphyry. When Christian forces recaptured the city in 1236, the Great Mosque was converted to a cathedral. 4 centuries later, a new nave and transept were added, while the minaret was converted to a bell tower. Many features of this mosque are based on the Great Mosque of Damascus. In the original mosque, all of the columns and capitals were reused from earlier Roman and Visigothic buildings. The Puerta del Puente was built in the 16th century on the site of previous Roman gates. The Kalahora Tower is a fortified gate of Islamic origin. This bridge was originally built by the Romans over 2,000 years ago. Most of the present structure was built by the Moors in the 8th century. The city of Seville is the largest in the Andalusian region. With a population of 700,000, it's the 4th largest city in Spain. Following the fall of the Roman Empire, the city fell into the hands of Germanic tribes before being conquered by the Moors in 712. For the next 500 years, Seville was firmly under Muslim rule. After the city was retaken by Christian forces in 1248, the mosques were either destroyed or converted to churches. More recently, when Seville hosted the Ibero-American Exposition in 1929, the Plaza de España was created to showcase the country's achievements in the modern world. It's designed as a big semicircle and incorporates a variety of architectural styles, including Neo-Renaissance, Neo-Baroque, and Art Deco elements. The tiled alcoves around the plaza represent the different Spanish provinces. The buildings around the plaza have been renovated and today are home to museums, government offices, and foreign consulates. The Palace of San Telmo is a classic example of civilian Baroque architecture. Originally a university for navigators, today it is the seat of the Andalusian autonomous government. The Alcazar of Seville is a royal palace built on the site of a Muslim residential fortress. Construction was begun in the 13th century, and the palace continued to be redesigned and expanded over the next 500 years. The palace is known for its exquisite tile decoration. The colorful maiolica and arista tiles are arranged in geometric patterns inspired by arabesque ornamentation. The courtyard of the Maidens refers to the dubious story that the Moors collected an annual tribute of 100 virgins from the Christian kingdoms of Iberia. The courtyard contains a long rectangular reflecting pool flanked by sunken gardens. As in other Moorish palace complexes, this one includes extensive formal gardens, along with fruit trees and a variety of fragrant flowers. After Christian forces retook the city, the Grand Mosque next to the palace served as a Catholic cathedral for several centuries. It was eventually replaced by a new structure completed in the 16th century, which today is the world's largest Gothic cathedral. A number of Spanish monarchs are buried here, along with Christopher Columbus. Seville's bullfighting arena seats 14,000 people for this popular spectacle, which dates back thousands of years, at least to Roman times, and continued through the Moorish period. Today, bullfighting is still very much a part of the city's culture. During the grand annual fair in April, the arena is jam-packed every day for a week. At the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula is the tiny British territory of Gibraltar. Its 32,000 residents are crammed into a mere 2.5 square mile area. Gibraltar has been a British territory for the last 300 years, since it was captured in the War of Spanish Succession. Popular among tourists, Gibraltar has the only wild monkey population in Europe. Originally from Morocco, there are currently some 300 Barbary macaques in 5 troops who occupy the Upper Rock area. One of the women in our group got bitten by a monkey and had to be taken to the hospital for a tetanus shot. Gibraltar was an important British Royal Navy base during the Napoleonic Wars, and again in World War II, since it controls the only entrance into the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. Half the world's seaborne trade passes through the Strait of Gibraltar, which is only 9 miles wide. We spent 2 nights in a modern hotel on the beach in Marbella, the second largest city in the province of Malaga. It's long been a popular resort for Spaniards, tourists, and celebrities from around the world. King Fahd of Saudi Arabia was a regular here for decades, along with his retinue of thousands that included his nephew Osama bin Laden. Actors Sean Connery, George Clooney, and Antonio Banderas all had homes here. One of the highlights of this tour for me was the day trip we took to North Africa. We boarded a ferry from the Spanish port of Algeciras that took us to Ceuta, a Spanish autonomous city bordering Morocco. After Carol learned to ride a camel, we proceeded to enter the walled Moroccan city of Tétouan. This ancient city belonged to the Berbers in the 3rd century BC and later to Phoenicians before becoming a Roman city under Augustus. It was fascinating to stroll through the Medina, or Old City, with its winding streets lined with outdoor vendors and tiny hole-in-the-wall shops. The bustling Medina dates back to around 1500, when the city was once again rebuilt, this time after being destroyed by Castilians in retaliation for piracy. Here you won't find much in the way of fancy packaging, or any packaging for that matter. No boxes, no bags, no styrofoam or shrink wrap. Just large amounts of fresh produce, meat and fish, along with huge bags full of spices, nuts, and other food staples. Tiny shops selling handcrafted clothes and exquisite jewelry also line the street. The Royal Palace was built in 1988 and is used during the summer by the current Moroccan King, Mohammed VI. We had lunch at a traditional-looking restaurant near the Grand Mosque. As is so often the case, the places where large tour groups can find good meals are usually expensive restaurants catering mainly to foreigners. After lunch, we visited another tourist trap where we witnessed a high-powered salesman literally pitching overpriced rugs to our group. The royal walls of Ceuta date to 962. They were extensively reinforced and expanded to protect the city from numerous attacks and sieges over the next 800 years. We could see vineyards from the bus as we headed back north toward Granada, a city with some of the best examples of Moorish architecture. Granada means pomegranate, and this fruit is featured in the city's coat of arms. The city is also home to the University of Granada, one of the country's finest, with over 80,000 students. In 1492, the last Muslim ruler on the peninsula surrendered to the Christian forces of King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile, who then established their residence here. Both are buried in the cathedral's royal chapel. Alhambra means the red one, and refers to the reddish color of the walls that completely surround the palace and fortress complex. Originally constructed over 1,000 years ago on former Roman fortifications, it was completed some 400 years later to become a palace city for the first monarch of the Nasrid dynasty. In its heyday, this plateau housed the royal palace along with a citadel and fortress. It also served as the residence for the Nasrid sultans, senior officials, servants, and the court and elite soldiers. Shortly after King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella established their residence here in 1492, Christopher Columbus came to request their endorsement before the fateful expedition that would take him to America. Less than 60 years later, the royal court was moved to Madrid. During subsequent centuries, Alhambra suffered the ravages of warfare, neglect, squatters, earthquakes, and vandalism. Restoration work began in the 19th century and will continue indefinitely. Typical Moorish architectural features include the horseshoe arches and decorations using intricate geometric forms, arabesques, and calligraphy. Every one of the marble lions would spout water from its mouth, using a hydraulic system that provided fresh water to Alhambra. We visited a local workshop producing beautiful lacquered trays and other items. This may be the only place on the trip that I bought a few souvenirs. The Generalife Palace is just above the Alhambra. It was built in the early 14th century and has one of the oldest surviving Moorish gardens. After dinner, we attended a flamenco show in a cave-like venue. Granada is known for its flamenco variant, the Zambra, with a more oriental feel to it, while the spectators were tourists from around the world who enjoyed the lively and colorful performances. An evening stroll gave us a final look at the illuminated Alhambra. Among the more unusual dwellings I've ever seen are the caves at the edge of the city of Guadix. It's unknown when these caves first began to be used as living space. By the first half of the 16th century, records show that construction inside the caves was in full swing after the Islamic period. Today, there are about 3,000 people living in some 2,000 caves, which represent the largest cave complex in Europe. The cave we visited serves as a museum that displays a wide array of some rather eclectic Andalusian artifacts, including furniture, ceramics, farm tools, advertising posters, and original artwork. The owner's son was busy with his wheelbarrow and hardly noticed the American visitors. Valencia is the third largest city in the metropolitan area after Madrid and Barcelona. The city of 800,000 was founded by the retired Roman soldiers in the 2nd century BC. It's situated on the banks of the Turia River and faces the Gulf of Valencia on the Mediterranean Sea. Valencia has one of the largest historic centers of any Spanish city, extending over more than 400 acres. Construction of the cathedral began in the 13th century. It was built atop an ancient Visigothic cathedral, which later became a mosque. It's kept fairly simple since it was built quickly to mark the Christian territory against the Muslims. The tower offers stunning views in all directions. Even more striking is the modern architecture to be found in the futuristic City of Arts and Sciences. The complex was built in stages. The first building and the centerpiece of the complex, the Hemispheric, opened in 1998. It resembles a giant eye and houses an IMAX cinema, a planetarium, and a laserium featuring laser light shows. Other buildings include an opera house, various modernistic bridges, plazas, and towers, as well as a science museum that looks like a huge whale skeleton and which houses Europe's largest oceanographic museum. It is home to 45,000 animals from 500 different species, including sharks, penguins, dolphins, sea lions, walruses, beluga whales, birds, and reptiles. My partner Carol was delighted that we were able to get tickets to see a performance of Jules Massenet's opera Thais, featuring the Spanish tenor Plácido Domingo. On the way north to Barcelona, we stopped briefly in the lovely seaside city of Peñascola. It's a popular resort known for its great beaches and historic old town. It was originally settled by the Iberians some 2,500 years ago. They were later replaced by Phoenicians, then Carthaginians, Greeks, and Romans. The medieval castle perched above the city affords great panoramic views in all directions. It was built some 800 years ago by the Knights Templar, who were disbanded by the Pope a short time later. Barcelona is the last major city on our grand tour of Spain. The city itself, with a population of 1.6 million, is the second largest Spanish city after Madrid. Another 3 million people live in the surrounding metropolitan area. Since we had little more than a day here, I feel we could have spent lots more time exploring Barcelona's many important sites and colorful neighborhoods. Much of what we did see was associated with the work of Antoni Gaudí, the leading exponent of Catalan modernism. Casa Mila was the last private residence designed by Gaudí. Completed in 1912, the building, with its undulating facade, is popularly known as La Pedrera, the stone quarry. On the roof are 28 chimneys, along with an array of skylights stairway exits, domes, and air vents. This rooftop assemblage has been called a garden of warriors, as the chimneys appear to be protecting the skylights. Each of the handcrafted wrought iron balconies is unique. In recent decades, the building has undergone extensive renovation. Many of the apartments still feature sculpted ceilings, handcrafted wooden doors, windows, and furniture. A number of rooms displaying exquisite furniture and other historic artifacts are now open to the public. Two more splendid examples of Catalan modernist architecture are in downtown Barcelona. One was designed by Gaudi in the early 20th century. Our farewell dinner in Barcelona gave us a chance to toast our excellent Spanish tour director. Gaudi's exuberant creativity is also on display in Parc Güell, where he lived during the last 20 years of his life. Located on a rocky hill overlooking the city, the park opened to the public in 1926, the year of Gaudi's death. Its central focus is a terrace surrounded by a long bench in the form of a sea serpent. Gaudi and his collaborators decorated the bench with mosaic collages of ceramic and crystal fragments in the form of stars, flowers, fish, and other creatures. Gaudi designed 3 viaducts to allow carriages to carry visitors to the hilltop. Under the roadway viaduct is a colonnaded footpath with sloping external columns. The mosaic salamander by the stairway is popularly known as the Dragon. Construction continues on Sagrada Familia, the Basilica of the Holy Family. Begun in 1882, Gaudi became chief architect the following year, combining elements of Spanish Gothic, Catalan modernism, and Art Nouveau. It's quite unique, unlike any other church in the world. Final completion will take at least another decade. Our stay in Barcelona was far too short. I feel we barely scratched the surface, so I hope to someday return and get to know more of this fascinating city. The last spot we visited on our Spanish tour was the monastery of Montserrat, literally the serrated mountain. Less than an hour's drive from Barcelona, the monastery was founded in 1025 and continues to this day to have 30 Benedictine monks in residence. Montserrat's main attraction is La Moreneta, a small wooden statue of a black Virgin Mary. La Moreneta is the patroness of the Catalunya region. The statue was originally tan, but its color has darkened over 8 centuries of candle smoke and humidity. The faithful shuffle down a long passage to touch the orb in Mary's hand, while she remains protected inside a glass case. We left Spain filled with vivid impressions of beautiful landscapes, cities, and people. Spain today plays a vital role in the global economy, while also preserving many exquisite monuments from its colorful past. Like other former imperial nations, Spain has learned that you don't need to rule an empire to be on top of the world.